A number of years ago, I had an opportunity to go and visit my grandfather's brother, Neil Linehan. He and his wife, Nora, lived in the townlands of Ballycroy. The townlands were called Shanamanra, and they lived in a small cottage that had no running water, no gas, no electricity. Made for long nights, but those long nights were filled with all kinds of stories. One of the stories that Neil talked about was during the famine times when the potato crop had failed and people began to starve and die in the locality. Early on, they would take the people who passed away and bury them in the churchyard over at the church in Fahy. Later on, as the people became more destitute as the famines continued, they buried them in the potter's field just outside the churchyard. And as the famines continued even longer, the people themselves that were still alive were too weak to even dig the graves. And they took the bodies of the poor people who passed away and laid them on the floor of the church, and they stacked them up there like a rick of turf. After the famines had ended, they let the bodies go, and they left the church in the hands of God. He also said that after a period of time that the angels would come and fill the holy water troughs for those poor souls. It made no sense to me, but later on, we went to the house where he and his family, my grandfather, were born there in Duna. We looked around the shell of the house and then started to walk across the fields towards the old church in Fahy. About halfway through, I said to Neil, I said, "By golly, I'm getting hungry here." And old Neil turned around to me, and he reached in his pocket and he took out a small piece of dried, crusty bread. And he said, "Now, go ahead and have this here." And I said, "I'm a pretty big guy. That's not going to fill me up." "Now, you don't understand." "What is it that I don't understand?" "You went there now when you stepped on a patch of hungry grass." "Well, what's that?" said I. "That is a place there in the field where some poor soul breathed his last during the time of the famine. And it is that person's soul now that is crying out through you for some nourishment. Now you have to go and eat that there and satisfy that poor devil." And I ate that piece of bread, and somehow I was satisfied, and we continued on, and we walked towards the church. And when we arrived at the door of the church, I looked down on the floor, and across the floor was a number of bones scattered everywhere. I looked by the door at the holy water trough that was hewn in there, and I looked, and it was full of water. And then I looked up where the roof, the old thatch roof had once been, and I looked up at the blue skies. And it is then that I came to know how it was that the angels came every time that it rained to fill the holy water troughs for those poor souls.
Oh, Father dear, I oft times hear you speak of Erin's Isle. Her lofty scene, her valleys green, her mountains rude and wild. They say she is a pretty place, wherein a prince might dwell. Then why did you abandon it? The story to me tell. My son, I loved my native land with energy and pride, until a blight came o'er the land, my sheep and cattle died. My rent and taxes were too high, them I could not redeem. Oh, and that's the cruel reason why I left old Skibbereen. Oh, well, I do remember that bleak December day. The landlord and the sheriff came to drive us all away. They set my roof on fire with their demon yellow spleen, and that's another reason why I left old Skibbereen. Ah, your mother too, Lord rest her soul, lay on the snowy ground. She'd fainted in her anguish at the desolation round. She never rose, but passed away to death's immortal dream, and found a lonely grave, my boy, in dear old Skibbereen. Aye, and you were only 2 years old, and feeble was your frame. I could not leave you with my friends, you bore your father's name. I wrapped you in my coat to mourn the dead of night unseen, and heaved a sigh and bade goodbye to dear old Skibbereen. Oh, it's well I do remember the year of 48, when we arose with Erin's boys to battle against fate. I was hunted through the mountains as a traitor to the Queen, aye, and that's another reason why I left old Skibbereen. Oh, father dear, the day will come when vengeance loud will call, and Irishmen with faces stern will rally one and all. I'll be the man to lead the van beneath our flag of green, and loud and high we'll raise the cry, revenge for Skibbereen.